So a couple years ago, I read through this book, Contact by Carl Sagan, and found it fascinating. I want to share in a lightning video, lightning fast here, what I learned from it. Absolutely blew me away. I went into it as a Christian theologian studying science stuff, so I'm really interested in the conversation between religion and science. I think that's fascinating. I think about that kind of stuff all the time. And I thought, I want to learn better how someone on the other side of that, someone from a kind of, not just a secular worldview, but like a scientistic, kind of hardcore secular type worldview thinks. And so I read this book by Carl Sagan because a couple of reasons. One is everybody in that vein really respects him. He's like a grandfather type figure. If you can go on YouTube and see Neil deGrasse Tyson's tribute to him. I know he's not an atheist, he's more of an agnostic, but Bill Maher likes him, all the new atheists. He's a widely respected person in that vein. He himself, Sagan, was an agnostic, as we'll talk about. But he very much embodies maybe more the other side. So I thought, I want to learn sympathetically. I want to do what Atticus Finch talks about in To Kill a Mockingbird, and I want to really try to understand another worldview. How does it make sense to them? And I think fiction can be helpful for doing that. Fiction, sometimes the way someone tells a story can give you a glimpse into them a little bit more. You see a little bit more of the nuances of their worldview, maybe even a little bit more the humanity of their worldview. I feel like I know C.S. Lewis so much better from reading his fiction than if I just read like The Problem of Pain and Miracles and books like that. So I go into this book, absolutely blew me away. I want to share 4 things that surprised me and then the lesson I took from all of that. Spoilers are coming ahead, so if you have not seen the movie, it's a 1997 movie, 1980 book. It's one of the best-selling science fiction books of all time. It's a really interesting book. So if you don't want to know the plot, stop the video now, because spoilers are coming. Basically, an alien species contacts planet Earth and gives them instructions to build something that looks like this. I'll put it up on the screen. And it's kind of a machine to travel and communicate with the aliens. So most alien movies have violent aliens. Actually, that's kind of a cool genre too. It's like science fiction horror movies. Like the original Alien movie is so scary. But most alien movies, there's conflict, and that's kind of how it works. War of the Worlds and so many others. But this is, and I thought, well, maybe it'll be more boring, when you have like benevolent, peaceful aliens, as this book. But I actually found it much more interesting, because when you have peaceful aliens, it enables you to explore how people respond to that. And it's really interesting. The way, for example, it unites people. People of different cultures, for example, it's like, well, I may be really different from so-and-so, but compared to the aliens, we got a lot in common. And one of the things that comes up is religion. So there's all these, again, the religion versus science type debates. And I think it's chapter 10, there's this lengthy debate. And the first thing that surprised me is just how sympathetic Sagan is to religion. Certainly he's not, like you'd expect from someone like Bill Maher, just taking cheap shots at religion. But even beyond that, he's actually like very sympathetic to it. There's lots of Aquinas and Augustine quotes starting off the chapters. And in that debate, there's this character named Palmer Joss, I think is how you pronounce his name. He looks like this. He's Matthew McConaughey played him in the movie. And this character is a Christian pastor. So you certainly have some fanatical religious types. That's there. And then you have some sympathetic skeptics, like the other main character we'll talk about in a second. But Palmer Joss, from my vantage point in the debate that happens in chapter 10, it's like a debate. People are responding to the aliens coming, and it's science and religious people debating. And the things that come out of that debate, on my reading of it, is that he's basically saying science has limitations. He says science and religion both spring from the same source, namely the numinous. And Palmer Joss has a comment where at one point he says, perhaps we are all wayfarers on the road to truth. And that seems to be the kind of the perspective that carries the day. And already I'm kind of thinking, wow, that, it's not a huge deal, but it's just interesting that there's a little more sympathy for religion, a little bit more. It doesn't have that hard edge of condescension and disdain that you get like from the new atheists. So I'm like, okay, it surprised me already. But then you keep going. And the second thing that surprised me is as the events of the story are unfolding, what you see is that basically when the scientists come back from having made contact with the aliens, they're given no proof. And so basically the criticism that they're facing is the same criticism that religion often gets, namely, you have an experience, but you don't have any verifiable data. And it's even cast like that in the book. That's like how it's framed. It's like you have this experience, but you can't prove it. So how are you expecting other people to believe something just based upon your own experience? And in particular, there's the character Ellie Arroway, who's played by Jodie Foster in the movie. And she's a skeptic and a longtime critic of religion. But has this experience. So she kind of talks about how funny it is. Well, I'll just read what she says. At one point, she's talking about how the circumstances have changed. And she says, don't you think there's been a strange reversal of our positions? She's talking to Palmer Joss. Here I am, the bearer of the profound religious experience I can't prove. Really, Palmer, I can barely fathom it. And here you are, the hardened skeptic, more successfully than I ever did, trying to be kind to the credulous. So she's like, it's this person who sees there's space for kind of something you can't prove. It's more of an openness to kind of experience and faith than I expected. And by the way, all throughout, the aliens are kind of functioning like God. So there's these theological overtones with the aliens all over the place. The first time that Ellie makes it into space, it's the summative statement in that section is that this is a numinous experience. The first time she sees the alien civilization, it's this transcendent experience. It fills her with joy so much that she's crying. She says, now I have hope. And then when she actually talks to the aliens, she leaves that conversation. It's as though a demon was exorcised from her. She's capable of loving in new ways. It heals her. And it's explicitly cast as this kind of religious experience. That's the language she herself uses, the bearer of this religious experience. So that already is also kind of surprising to me. And I'm like, wow, okay. But you could say, okay, so fine. So Carl Sagan is kind of wanting to capture some of the good things about religious experience, the religious quest for knowledge, how faith, not everything that's valuable can be proved with hard science. Okay, fine. But he's doing all that with the aliens rather than with God. But that's not it. And that's the third thing that absolutely shocked me, is the aliens ultimately point backwards behind themselves to some kind of supernatural antecedent. There's the extraterrestrial contact, but that leads you to a supernatural contact. And this is what surprised me. And that happens in a couple ways. One is that the aliens, there's this transit system of wormholes, you might remember from the movie. The aliens say, we don't know where this came from, because she thinks that they built it. And they're like, no, it's just always been here. And then there's other little things that basically suggest what you could call a teleological argument, or an argument from design, where, for example, in the number pi, if you remember from math classes, this is 3.141, and then a bunch of numbers going on and on. Encoded in that number, there's information. And nobody knows why it got there. And there's all this talk in the final few pages of there being an artist. Okay, now let me read this. Again, if you don't want to know this, stop the video now. This is the last page of the book. Basically, here's how he ends the whole book. The universe was made on purpose. In the fabric of space and in the nature of matter, as in a great work of art, there is, written small, the artist's signature, standing over humans, gods, and demons, subsuming caretakers and tunnel builders, as the aliens. There is an intelligence that predates the universe. The circle had closed. She found what she had been searching for. I will never forget. I mean, just imagine me. Here I am trying to understand a scientific worldview, and that's the way the book ends. You can see how much I marked it up. And then, okay, so now again, I'm not trying to speak to Carl Sagan's intentions here. Whenever you read fiction, you know, have a little wiggle room for that. This may not give you everything, but also it might give you true insights into their worldview a little bit. Again, he was an agnostic. He was a little more open than the new atheists. He considered like the impersonal God of Albert Einstein or Spinoza, people like that, who think maybe there's some force out there, some intelligence, but it doesn't care about us. That kind of way of thinking. So he's open to that. But here's the fourth thing that surprised me. So not only is there more openness to religion, faith, and God or something like God in the book, but all of those things seem to be what we need. Like because the main thing that happens at the end is Ellie Arroway says she discovers something kind of traumatizing about her past. I won't go into that. And she's reflecting upon that on the second to last page over here on this side. And it says she had spent her whole career attempting to make contact with the most remote and alien of strangers, while in her own life she had made contact with hardly anyone at all. She had been fierce in debunking the creation myths of others and oblivious to the lie at the core of her own. She had studied the universe all her life but had overlooked its clearest message. For small creatures such as we, the vastness is bearable only through love. And then at the very end, the actual last sentence of the book, after talking about the intelligence that precedes the universe, it says she had found what she was looking for. And it feels like Sagan is, you know, it's not this, in other words, the possibility of God doesn't come in simply as a scientific hypothesis to explain like the physical constants of the universe or something like that. It's a surprisingly inward and poignant turn here at the end where this is actually the answer to her personal needs, you know? And I'll never forget, I mean, here I am, because what she's basically saying is, it's been easier to make contact with the aliens out there than it is with my own heart and fill the needs in my own heart. And here I am, you know, you got to picture me in our year in Chicago, I'm reading this book, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to understand the scientific worldview that's out there. I'm going to try to go to the patron saint of this stream and like understand how people think like that. And I get this, you know, a story in which the hardened skeptic comes to see the need for faith. Aliens ultimately point you back prior to them to God or some kind of creator. And the human heart is harder to penetrate than the vastness of the universe. And that is not what I expected. And again, I don't want to speak to Sagan's intentions, but my point in this video is to share my experience as a reader out of respect and admiration for his amazing book. And my personal takeaway, I don't know if he'd be happy about this or not, but I don't care. I'm going to say what my personal takeaway is this. People often think that in the religion science dialogue that the more science advances and moves forward, the more religion sort of recedes and falls backward. And I think it's the opposite. And I think this book gets at why I feel that way. The more science pushes forward, the more it makes the God question only more poignant. The more you penetrate the vast recesses of the universe, knowledge of what is around us at the physical level, even if you do make contact with aliens, in the midst of the conversation with aliens, she's still wondering. In fact, the effect of one of those conversations is she's longing to be reunited with her deceased loved ones, you know? No matter how, the further you go at that level of our knowledge and experience and observation, the more it only makes more poignant, more vivid, the question of God. That's how I feel. And that's what this book did for me. I don't know if it should have done that. I'm just saying that's what it did, you know. Thanks for watching this. I know it gets weary when we say like and subscribe all the time, but it does help us because YouTube is a weird system of algorithms that no one has figured out. And the more likes and subscribes and shares and all that, the more it helps. And I'm really hoping these videos will be helpful for people out there. Let me know what you think. Have you read the book? Have you seen the movie? What did you think? Do you think I'm overdoing it? I have a little fear I'm doing, but I was just so enthusiastic about this because I just, you know, it's surprise to me. So maybe I'm curious what you think. Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.